Hello and welcome to Estuary TV News with me, James Dunn. Tonight we've got our weekly paper review where we take a look at all of the news from the region in the last week. But first, here's Richard Morris with the news headlines.
Hello, in the headlines today, Lowgate Junction and Alfred Gelder Street in Hull are closed each night until next Tuesday for roadworks, and a short action film has been made in the area and has previewed to residents. A brand new swimming pool has been opened in Brigg. Andrew Percy, MP for Brigg and Goole, said that the new pool shows investment from North Lincolnshire Council, and he praised everyone involved in the refurbishment.
I mean, this is a really well resourced by people, a really well used resource by people from Brigg, Broughton, Scorby Brook, the surrounding area. The fact it's been invested in, expanded the gym facilities here massively, means this is, top quality, first rate, facility now, and residents will continue to use it. I mean, it's really busy today. The swimming pool's absolutely packed out. So, I think local people will really appreciate this investment. Other councils haven't done that, and they've spent their time whinging and whining about the government. This council hasn't done that, it's just got on and done the job. And as a result, I spend a lot of my time opening new facilities that this council has invested in, so it can be done.
A Grimsby boxer formally opened his new gym that is a registered charity aimed at reaching out to young, vulnerable people. Wayne Bloy was due to have former opponent and current WBA world champion Jamie McDonnell to cut the ribbon at Fusion Boxing Fit on Ladysmith Road. Unfortunately, McDonnell had to cancel as he and his wife were expecting the arrival of a new baby. Instead, Bloy invited representatives from Life for a Kid to cut the ribbon, a charity which raises money to help terminally ill children.
I brought a Life for a Kid down. I first came across this charity when I was boxing myself. They're based in Hull, and they raise money for children that need life-saving operations and life-saving treatment. And I really kind of admired what them guys did. That they're a charity themselves that are struggling financially as well. So if I can get my guys in this gym to be doing charity events, fun runs, all kinds of things, I'd like the money to go to a Life for a Kid.
A local historian is going to give a speech about the Lancaster bomber, which is currently visiting the country. For the next 2 months, the Canadian Lancaster and its British equivalent will be touring the UK in various airfields.
The Canadian Lancaster Vera is spending 3 days at Humberside on the 18th, 19th and 20th of August, and on the evening of the 19th, North Lincolnshire Tourism have arranged an event at 7 o'clock in the evening. And I'll be talking about my grandfather, William Hugh Ewan, who was a pioneer aviator. I was brought up as a boy to believe that he was the first Scotsman to fly, but after a very robust conversation with the assistant curator of the Museum of Flight outside Edinburgh, and doing a huge amount of research, genealogical research, on the first 100 pilots to hold pilot's licenses, I discovered that my grandfather was the 63rd person to hold a UK pilot's license, and he was the 5th Scotsman to hold a UK pilot's license. He became the first person to land in Lincolnshire. Unfortunately, the field he chose to land in, there was a lot of barley stubble, which snagged his undercarriage, and he became the first man to crash in Lincolnshire.
Local actors and filmmakers grace the silver screen in Cleethorpes for the premiere of Grimsby RV. The 10-minute short has been made as part of the Action Film Challenge to make an action movie in just 30 days. Production company Yellow Belly's entry is the only one from outside the US, and their movie Havelock came second in last year's competition. They've submitted the movie, and winners will be announced in Florida at the end of the month. Last week, it premiered at Cleethorpes Parkway, and we spoke to star Della Brett after she saw the final effort for the first time.
I was actually really pleasantly surprised. When they said they're going to put in all these effects, you don't really know what it's going to look like, and you're worried, maybe it'll look a bit cheesy, but I was really impressed. I was so impressed. I was sat there, and I just enjoyed the film, which I never normally do when I'm acting in it. Not only does it give you practical uses for your show reels, so you can get agents actually into Hollywood films, hopefully. But it's just so much fun. You get to meet people with likewise hobbies, and you meet loads of new friends. I met so many new people who I think I'm going to be friends with for a very long time here.
That's all we've got time for now. Goodbye.
Now, my guest today is Steve Ryder from CPO Media. Thank you for coming in today, Steve.
Pleasure. Nice to see you again, James.
So we're going to take a look at all the news from the region for the last week. Where should we start?
The story seems to have been, certainly since the weekend, flooding.
Yeah.
I came back from Greece on Sunday to stories that Louth had been underwater at the weekends where I live. Obviously, Grimsby have been very badly affected, especially the areas around the West Marsh and near Asda, the underpass there.
And of course, it's the middle of summer.
Absolutely. And I think it's inevitable. There's something beautifully British about it, that at the end of the heat wave come the floods. I think the question is what happens next? Whose responsibility is it? What do we do about this? Obviously, we can see from the dramatic pictures in the paper, which always makes good news, that people and businesses are affected. How much money, how much resource should we be putting into flood defence, and whose responsibility is it to clear up the mess? There's always great stories in the papers of people bailing out their own homes and businesses being underwater, but is it the responsibility of small government or big government to put that right?
So, I mean, where you are, Louth, there has been multi-million-pound investment into flood defences.
Absolutely.
After people rallied saying that that's what they need, yet it's not saved them from this. And interestingly, what you say about whose responsibility is it? Since we've had this flooding, we've had national government say that local government needs to look at its flood defences and its drainage systems because that is their responsibility.
Absolutely. And what's the priority? What's the priority nationally? So we know for a fact that the floods in the north were as bad as, if not worse than the floods in Somerset and in the home counties. But because it doesn't happen down there so often, it becomes national news. I don't suppose for a moment flooding in Grimsby and Louth and Cleethorpes has been national news over the past week. But obviously there is a responsibility somewhere. Flood defences have been put in. They've been put in by water boards. They've been put in by councils. Does it happen often enough that we need to now become a national priority? Is it a freak occurrence, which ironically is becoming less freakish? In other words, it's happening more often. I mean, the beautiful irony for me is that the story in the Louth Leader, of course, is that, dare I bring it up again, supermarkets, which of course is often mentioned.
Last time we talked about this for a long time due to the cattle market.
But that both the Co-op and the Morrison supermarkets had to be evacuated because
they
of
made
flooding.
it into that main story.
Absolutely,
as well.
they still managed to get that into the story. Now, whether that meant that people were going hungry in Louth over the last few days, I don't know. But no, in all seriousness aside, it's a massive issue if your home or your business floods. It does seem to be happening more often now than in past years, and therefore I think it's something that we've got to take seriously. But as we move on to talk about other stories today, where again business cases and priorities are often having to be sort of weighed up against each other, we need to look at, and I think a proper study needs to be done, and how often this is happening. Is it the same areas, the same parts of town?
And what the cause
And
is.
that's
because
right.
You said it very well when you first introduced this story, because what is the answer?
Absolutely.
We've had flood defences in Louth and still it's not made any difference.
So my understanding this time around was it was an enormous amount of rainfall happening in a short period of time. The last time that Louth had major flooding problems, it was a case of the river levels were rising because of rain that had happened elsewhere, moving down and water moving downstream. Now, I'm no expert, James, but I presume the defence against one isn't probably the same as the defence against the other.
Who knows? But hopefully they'll find out for everyone who's been affected.
Absolutely.
So what we got next?
Well, I think before we come on to another sort of
Business
solution
related.
versus business problem, let's talk about A-level results. Obviously, this has been the week where A-level students across the region have been looking at their results, looking at what the indications are for them, what their success.
So just to recap nationally, they said that the results went down for the first time in something like, it was more than 20 years.
Absolutely, and that was the main news on the radio, driving into work, when you turned the television on last week.
Some people saying that's not a bad thing.
No, absolutely not. So what's the picture in our area? Well, actually, if you read the local papers, it's very difficult to get a clear picture of what's going on. Of course, all of the schools are quite rightly portraying their success stories, and success seems to be portrayed in very different ways. as we were talking earlier about GCSE results, which will come out obviously this week. GCSE results, it always seems to be very much a percentage of pupils gaining A star to C grades.
They've got that benchmark, 5 A star to C grades with English and maths.
Absolutely.
Whereas when you look at the papers, it's very difficult to know what that benchmark is, so it's difficult to compare.
Absolutely. I think what I'd like to do is just single out Case to Grammar, not because that they're a better school or anything else.
But they do, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know,
very well.
It's a very
undeniable,
academic school in the area. But I think the point I'm trying to make is not that they necessarily are more academic, but just the way that they've actually portrayed their results makes it much clearer. So for the reader who's not necessarily sort of steeped in education, doesn't know about UCAS points or anything else.
How have they
like
broke
that.
it down then?
So what they've done is they've talked about highlights, including 76.4% of all results being at A star to B. 47.5% of all grades achieved being A star or A. I think that makes it very clear for the reader to understand. They then talk about their pass rate being 100%, but we know that that's a broad band. But having said that, they break it down. 2/3 of students gained at least one A grade and one third gained at least one A star.
Which is easy for them to do because they've done so well.
Absolutely.
Whereas without casting aspersions on other colleges and sixth forms, often you get that pass rate, you know, maybe 100% of passes, for example, but that could be 3 or 4 passes at whatever level.
Yeah. So if we use what Caister did, where they talked about A star to B, if we could perhaps across our region look at something like that, it makes it very easy for the reader to make a comparison. Now, you know, I'd like to finish by saying, you know, congratulations to everybody who's done well in their A levels.
Definitely.
Especially those who are now moving on into higher education.
And it's lovely to see these stories because, of course,
Absolutely.
constantly you hear of young people doing bad things.
Absolutely.
And this time of year, you hear about these people who've worked hard and they've got their reward.
Absolutely wonderful to see so many sort of smiling faces on the pages of our newspaper, so that's great. I think the next story is a very interesting one. We are aware that local authorities, councils across the region are finding that they're having a very difficult time financially, and there's been changes in policy about how things work. So we see that Balfour Beatty moved into North East Lincolnshire, now called Kofi, obviously. And there's a story in the Hull Daily Mail which is very interesting. I think we'd all like to see, whether we're in Hull, whether we're in Scunthorpe, Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Louth, Caister, wherever we may be, that we try and buy local, that we're trying to safeguard our local economy. And there's a story which comes out of the Hull Daily Mail, but I think it's applicable across the region, which is the local highways firms, MB Roche and Sons, who is on the council's approved contractor list, have lost a contract to a company that's come from elsewhere in the country.
And what he's saying is that he'd like to see more local firms.
Absolutely.
And that would mean more money into the local economy.
Absolutely.
Instead of outsourcing.
Yeah. He said that Mr. Roche, who's one of the directors of the company, said people in our industry will be pricing a job and all of a sudden it will go to a company in another city.
And you could say it's sour grapes, but then you can see his argument as well, can't you?
Absolutely. So I know we tender for public sector work.
At CPO Media.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an enormous amount of work just to become an approved provider, to get through tender processes, pre-qualification questionnaires, etc. To then find that having done all of that work,
it's an investment as well, and then not to get it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it would be hard to take, but I suppose, you know, equally, and also I suppose it's difficult to compete with these larger companies.
James, always two sides to every story. I think it's worth saying that the town clerk, Ian Anderson, who manages procurement for the authority, said that 56% of spending was with local suppliers, and it's the 4th highest in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
So like everything else in the news, there's two sides to the story.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, but I mean, it's a perfect way to finish the story. Thank you very much for coming in today, Steve. Now, don't forget that if you've got news to share with us, you can call us on 01472 315 561, contact us on Facebook or Twitter at Estuary TV, or email on info@estuary.tv. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.